All right, everyone, welcome to the very last session for today, not for the summit, because tomorrow is going to be a full new day with a bunch of extra awesome speakers. And right now, an extra awesome speaker that we have is Paul Henderson. And Paul is an author, speaker, and consultant on creating income through customer outcomes. And this is the topic of today's session, customer engagement through customer outcomes. Paul, welcome to the session and take it away.
Thank you, Natalie. Great to be here with everybody. So we're going to talk today about this yawning gap in customer engagement. And hopefully that's got some interest. What is this yawning gap thing about? But before I do that, perhaps let me give you a little background as to how it is I come to be speaking with you today. So my background before founding Outcome Leaders was running the Asia Pacific region for an enterprise software company. So I had about 200 people across 9 countries supporting 800 or so enterprise customers. In the last 5 years that I was in that role, a number of interesting things happened. The first is that the company, which had been an on-premise company, switched to the cloud. And we went through all of that transition, and that is fun. The second is I decided in our region that we were not doing enough to create great business outcomes for our customers. And I decided I wanted to tackle that. So I hired some smart people, and between us, we designed and successfully ran an outcome program for over 5 years. At the end of that 5 years, a few things occurred to me. The first is I was a bit hooked on this outcomes thing. I was thoroughly enjoying being engaged on that. The second, I was seeing companies getting interested in outcomes themselves, other tech companies particularly. And I felt like with my experience, maybe I could help. And the third was I found I actually really cared about this. I really do not think it's okay for companies, particularly tech companies, to sell their products and services and for customers not to get great business outcomes. So I decided I wanted to tackle that. I had been working on my first book, the Chief Capability Officer, as a bit of a hobby while I was still working. So I resigned, I published that first book, then got to work researching and writing my second book, The Outcome Generation, which was released a little over 3 years, or a little under 3 years ago. In the last year or so, I've been researching and writing my third book called Income from Outcomes. At least that's the working title. And that you see here a couple of working covers. These may not be the final covers, but this is just to give you some idea of what this is about. So as part of that research, I've now interviewed somewhere between 90 and 100 executives in technology primarily. Between 250 and 300 hours of interviews have been done as research for this book. So what you're going to be seeing today is one of the things that has come out of all of that research for this next book. So our objectives for this session are twofold. First, we're going to talk about what this gap in customer engagement is and how it came about. And then second, I'm going to give you some idea about how you might tackle this gap that exists. So where does this yawning gap fit? And it fits. By the way, you'll notice that there's no camera. There was a slight technical issue that stopped the camera working. So unfortunately, we've got the still photo there. Hopefully the audio is coming through clearly. But just to explain why there's no camera. So this yawning gap, where it sits, it's in the customer's buying cycle, which is pretty important because we're talking here about CX being the new source of revenue, new way of driving revenue. Well, fundamentally, if we're not engaging with customers, if there's this gap, then how are we going to drive revenue? And the gap is in the buying cycle, which is so critical. So before we talk about this gap, I want to establish a principle. And that principle is that customers go on a journey, and we've all talked about customer journeys. At every step of the journey, there is a single decision that the customer makes before they move to the next step in the journey. And if they fail to make a decision, if they say, no, we're not going to move ahead, we're not deciding on this, or they make the wrong decision, for example, they choose another vendor, then the life cycle, the journey stops. At least it does for us with that customer. So we need to be aware of what each of the decisions are, and we need to drive our customer engagement so that the customer makes the right decisions. So in B2B, the buying cycle, it turns out there's only 3 of these decisions that we need customers to make. So let's talk about what those 3 decisions are. First, the customer needs to decide to investigate improving their business results. So there is never a buying cycle unless someone with enough authority says, our results need to be better in this area of the business. We're going to investigate ways to achieve those improved results. So the customer can be having problems, there can be users complaining, maybe their customers aren't happy, but until someone with enough authority makes that decision, there's no buying cycle. So the first decision that we need customers to make is to decide to investigate how to get better business results. Once they've made that decision, they need to work out what they're going to do to get those better business results. So perhaps it's new processes. Perhaps they need training of their users. Perhaps they've got partners that are engaged and they need to be better integrated. Or it could be they need some new technology. One way or another, they need a plan for how they're going to get those better business results. And if they don't decide, if it all seems too hard for them, and they might decide, oh, you know what, let's not do anything about this. We'll apply ourselves somewhere else. Then the buying cycle stops. So we need the customer to have a clear decision about what they're going to do to get the better business results they now want. Once they've done that, they're going to decide, if it's technology, which vendor they want to engage with. And so they need to then decide who they're going to engage. So there is a gap in this engagement model that we want to talk about. And to set some context for that, let me just take you back in time a little bit and talk about the buying cycle, the B2B buying cycle in the past. So we've got the 3 decisions that we need customers to make. When do customers and prospects in the past, when did they engage? Well, usually it was early in the what to do phase, when they were still working out how they would get the better business results. And that was because vendors were quite a good source of information about how they could get those better business results. So vendors had ideas of world's best practices, about industry trends, about where technology was going, maybe even of what their competitors, the customers' competitors, were doing. And so this all began 30 years ago. Vendors designed their engagement in the buying cycle around this assumption of early engagement in the buying cycle. So marketing's role was to create awareness, let those prospects and customers know that after they had decided to investigate, you as a vendor were a good organization to talk to, that you'd be able to help them. And then the role was passed to sales to work their magic and get help with the customer on the what to do, and then convince them to buy your software or your technology. And so that's what happened in the past, and most customer engagement models were designed with that thinking in mind. Why has that changed? And it has. It's changed because all of that information that was provided by vendors is now provided online. They don't need to talk to salespeople or even customer success to get this information. It's all out there. And when they're thinking about which vendor they might engage, then the same thing. There's so much information now about vendors, G2, Glassdoor, and others. So what this has meant is the customers and prospects no longer come to vendors for some of those insights that just 5 or 10 years ago they got from the vendors, from us. And so the engagement point moved out. And lots of people have talked about this. The Challenger sale people have talked about it in detail. Gartner and some Forrester, others talk about this late engagement. And so what that has changed is when the sales and customer and now customer success, when that engagement begins, and it's late in the cycle. And that is what has created this gap, this yawning gap in customer engagement. So we've got our 3 decisions and we've got the gap. But I'm hearing a number of you say, well, hang on. We deal with customers all the time. We're constantly engaged with them. How can there be this gap? And the question I would put to you is, and this came out very strongly from the research, who are you engaging and what topics are you engaging customers on? If you are talking with customers about product adoption, for example, you're in CS, you are not helping them think about their business results and the what to do phase if they need to improve those business results. So what the research shows is, the anecdotal research from the work I've done on the book, is that those 2 really critical decisions, deciding to investigate, that's what starts a buying cycle, which eventually may lead to revenue, and then deciding what to do, how to get that better business result, those decisions are being made behind closed doors by people with enough authority to decide to investigate, but with no input from us as vendors. And that's a problem for us, because if we're not able to influence and shape, then they may go off in directions that don't lead them to buying and spending with us, to increasing their relationship with us. And that's going to affect the revenue. So another thought, another principle here. When customers buy technology, software, other products, they buy it for the most part through business initiatives. So there are some companies where that's an exception. If you think SurveyMonkey, Atlassian, Slack, those companies are groundswell companies. So individuals start using the product and you get a groundswell effect going on. Eventually, someone might decide that that product will become a corporate standard. That's still in the minority. If you think about the big software companies, SAP, Salesforce, Microsoft selling to enterprise customers, the big companies, the software is still acquired through a business initiative. Someone in the organization puts a proposal to the board or to the executive committee to acquire software. So technology is acquired through a business initiative. They are thinking in those first 2 decisions about a plan for a business initiative. So this brings us to the point. They're concentrating on developing a business initiative. At the moment, they're doing that behind closed doors. We're not engaged for the most part. A little bit sometimes, but again, the research has suggests that most companies are not engaged in this phase. If we are going to re-engage in these early phases of the buying cycle, and the customer is working on a plan for a business initiative, what do we need to work on? Their plan. So we talk about a process called a build process, business initiative lead development. The concept here is pretty simple. If we want the customer to work with us, they're working on the business initiative, that's what we need to focus on. So we are not trying to drive product opportunities because they don't want to talk to us about that. We're trying to drive opportunities to build business initiatives. And that becomes the secret for how we can re-engage in the early stages of a buying cycle. So how do we do that? The build process has 3 steps. The first aligns with the first decision, the decide to investigate. So we need to get some curiosity going. We have to have the customer think, do I need better results? So something has to prompt them to even have a look at that question. And here's the interesting thing. In order for them to decide to investigate, they need to experience tension, desire, or fear. They need to be uncomfortable. They need to go, our current results aren't good enough. It's obvious we need to do something here. So our activity in this critical first step is to make the customer experience tension, desire, or fear, because that's the only thing that will break the inertia and allow them to do something different. That phrase, by the way, is one that I've taken from Seth Godin, who is one of the world's best known marketing experts. He says, awareness is not enough. Action requires tension, desire, or fear. So, and I think that applies perfectly. So we've created tension, desire, or fear, and now they're working on the second decision, what to do. How will we get those better business results? And that's, for most people, a two-step process. So that person with enough authority now needs a high-level approach. So is this just a change in process? Is it just training that's required? Is it partner integration? Maybe it's reporting and measurement, or maybe it's technology, or maybe it's a combination of a number of those. One way or another, they need to work out a high-level approach about how they're going to get those better business results. Once they've settled on a high-level path, the next step then is to have a detailed plan. So they need everything that's required to put the submission for a business initiative to the board of directors or to the executive committee. If they do that, if they get that detailed plan, then they will have the confidence to make a submission, because they're putting their reputation on the line here. They are taking some risk. So they need to be very sure that this business initiative can work. And so our engagement needs to ensure that they come up with a plan that creates that confidence that they are willing to put forward and get approval for that business initiative. So a question for you to think about. When do we talk about software? When do we talk about our products? So quite clearly, in the third decision, who to engage, the customer or prospect is interested in our software, in our products. In the first decision, when someone with enough authority is thinking about whether or not to investigate getting better business results, are they interested in our software? Not in the slightest. They are only focused on whether or not their results need to improve. In the what to do phase, are they interested in our software? They're not even sure they need software. Until they've made the final decision, they're not even sure that they're going to have any technology in this. Maybe it's only processes that need to change. Maybe it's just user training. Our role is to build trust and faith in this stage. The customer is trying to develop a plan for a business initiative. Right now, they are not interested in our software or other technology products. We have to stay away from that. We do not talk about our products in these phases when we're re-engaging. If we slip up, if we do talk about our products, the customer is going to react by saying they're just here to sell us. They're not genuinely trying to help us with this business initiative. This is just an excuse to try and sell us more product. And they'll exclude us. They'll close that door and they'll make these decisions behind those closed doors without us there. So we need to avoid this. So let's give you a couple of examples of how this approach might work. There's 3 steps: investigate, assess, and plan. And let's start with our larger customers, with our face-to-face customers. So There's different ways you can do this, and this is not intended to be prescriptive. But one way you can drive the investigate phase is through an executive business review. This is a review with one or more people who have the authority to decide to investigate, and that is critical. If the people in the room do not have that authority, you're not running an executive business review, and you need to stop the meeting and make sure those people are present. When they are present, talk about industry trends, talk about corporate developments on your side and their side, without talking about product, and maybe their competitors. Then, because they're an existing customer, particularly if they're a SaaS customer, then hopefully you've got information about their results, their business results. If not, then you need to go and work with them beforehand to prepare those results so that you can give insight to those executives. And hopefully you've got some benchmark data so you can show how they're doing against the industry. Out of that, you're creating tension, desire, or fear. From that discussion, you want to talk about possible ways of improving. The executives may have some ideas, so may you, and so the data may point to other areas. You're looking for 3 or 4 areas where you can get better results. You then form a joint working party to look at those results and do a high-level business case on each of those 3 or 4 areas. You go back to the executives and you present whether or not a business case exists. If there's no business case, say that. In a product, you then look for at least one area where they will move forward. Again, we're remaining product agnostic because we're building trust here, and they're not ready for product discussions. We'll get one, and now we need a detailed study. Again, we go with the joint team, their key people and our key people. We develop a really detailed report, everything that they need, what's going to change, the benefits, the costs, the ROI, a project plan, everything that a board of directors or an executive committee would need to approve. And again, we're remaining product agnostic. Here's the interesting thing. We're going to cover everything that is required to get those better business results, not just our technology. It is not a proposal for implementing technology. It is a report on how to get better business results. And because it covers all of those things and it's product agnostic, we can ask to be paid. It's a technique that we use called the 10% sale. So that's an example of how you may engage with your face-to-face customers. The smaller customers, you can't afford to do an executive business review, but we still need to go through the same steps. The customer still needs those decisions and that thinking. This time we're going to create an executive report. Again, if we're a SaaS vendor or it's a SaaS customer, we've got access with their permission to help create that report. We'll hopefully provide benchmarking data and give them a written report that will create tension, desire, or fear. We will then move to the high level approach. And one way of doing that is by giving them a very simple questionnaire, 10 to 15 questions, and create a customized report. And there are automated tools that will do this, that based on the answers the executive gives, that it will give a report of where they're doing well and where they could improve, and maybe even some financial analysis. And then they still need a detailed plan. If they're willing to pay for the study, great, that could work. If not, then maybe we could have a more detailed questionnaire. Again, we're taking them through those steps. And then finally, new business. This is a lot like the self-help customers. So it's mostly going to be done through electronic means in the first 2 steps, at least anyway. In the 3rd step, when we're getting to a detailed plan, then if it's a big prospect, then we might choose to go and engage directly. If it's a small customer, we might direct them to the more detailed questionnaire. Again, just an example of how this might work. So let's bring this all together. The buying cycle consists of 3 decisions. Customers need to decide to investigate, decide what to do, and then decide who they're going to work with. There is a gap that's been created by the availability of online information. We need to think about those first two steps being them, the prospect or customer, developing a plan for a business initiative. If we are going to re-engage and have influence, get behind that closed door, then we can use a build process, business initiative lead development. And that consists of 3 steps: ensuring the customer decides to investigate, creating that tension, desire, or fear; helping the customer come up with a higher level approach, assessing different approaches and making a decision about which one; and then finally, developing a more detailed plan, which will eventually be used for approval for this business initiative that will give them the confidence to proceed. So that is where the yawning gap in customer engagement sits and how we can fix it. So Natalie, I think we can now open it up for questions or comments. So I'm going to go out of presentation mode.
Yeah, let's see if there are any questions. Folks, we have, let's see, we have, 90 people in the session. So for all of you, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them here. We do have a couple minutes left for Q&A. So I don't see any questions right now, but I'm going to give it a few more seconds to see if anyone is willing to.
So perhaps just an observation, Natalie, while we're waiting to see if anyone's got any questions. This approach is a wonderful opportunity for customer success. So if we've got some customer success people on the line, then this area of re-engaging is an area that account managers don't do all that well. They're not renowned for systemic, disciplined approach. So the the customer success team taking this over is actually a great thing for them to do. So you don't have to do the selling. What you're doing is driving business initiatives. And then as an organization, you can decide when sales are brought in, if they are, to close out the deals in stage 3. So this is a good opportunity for customer success to play a much stronger role in creating opportunities for revenue, driving expansion revenue. And this should be the foundation for an expansion revenue program.
Amazing. Thank you so much for a very thought-provoking presentation. Definitely something, you gave us something to think about. I see lots of emojis and lots of thumbs up and stuff like that. Looks like you've laid out the information so nicely that people don't have any questions. Hey everyone, thank you so much for all of your participation. You've been absolutely amazing and very active and engaging. Thank you so much. Paul, I thank you for taking the time to spend with us and share your expertise. Thank you so much. And everyone, we will see you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Central, bright and early, for our second day of the summit. Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.